Hello, welcome to News Decoder's webinar on the U.S. presidency, past and future. My name is Nelson Graves. I'm the founder of News Decoder, and I'm speaking to you from southern Normandy in France. Now, 5 days from today, a new U.S. president will take office. Joe Biden will become the 46th president in the nation's history. His inauguration comes at a crucial time and under unique circumstances. Now, today we're honored to have two guests who can offer deep historical perspective into the U.S. presidency and a few personal anecdotes, I should hope. I'll introduce Gene Gibbons and Mark Weinberg shortly. But first, joining us on camera are students from News Decoder partner schools. Some, but not all, live in the United States. We have a total of 5 countries represented, I believe, today. And true to News Decoder's mission, this is an international roundtable, which means we can take a global view of the U.S. presidency. And before I ask the students on camera to introduce themselves, just a bit of housekeeping. We like these sessions to be interactive, and those of you who are off camera can ask questions at any time. There's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and please use it to ask a question or questions. There are a great many of you, and we may receive more questions than we'll have time to answer. And that's why I'd encourage you to vote for the questions that you most want to be answered. It'll make it easier for us to determine which ones are the most popular. And so with no further ado, I'd like to ask the students to introduce themselves. Please say your name, the name of the school, of your school, and where you're speaking from. And with no further ado, Abdelrahman, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. So my name is Abdulrahman Rabata and I'm from Jordan. And I go to King's Academy in Madaba, Jordan.
Thank you. And Benedict?
Hi. My name is Benedict and I'm from Denmark. And I go to Helsham School.
Thank you, Carolyn. Charles?
Hi, my name is Charles, or Charlie, and I go to school in New York City at Friends Seminary.
Terrific. Caroline?
Hello, my name is Caroline. I go to Hellerup and I'm from Denmark.
Christina?
Hi, I'm Christina. I go to the Thatcher School, and I'm also speaking from California.
Thank you. Emma?
I'm Emma Stokich. I go to St. Andrew's Episcopal School in Richland, Mississippi.
Thank you. Eugenia?
Hi, I'm Eugenia Rogers. I attend the African Leadership Academy and I'm in South Africa.
Evan? Oh, Evan's muted. Evan, can you hear me?
Apologies. Yes, I can hear you.
Right.
My name is Evan Wrights. I'm one of the student ambassadors for News Decoder at Indiana University, Bloomington, where I'm currently an undergraduate student.
And you're in Bloomington today?
I'm currently in Indiana.
Got you. Thank you. Giovanna?
Hi, I'm Giovanna Bravo. I live in Connecticut and I currently attend Greens Farms Academy.
Thank you. Hannah?
Hi, I'm Hannah. I go to the Hewitt School in New York City.
Thank you. Yon? I may be mispronouncing that, excuse me. Correct me if I am.
Good evening. My name is Ioan Pristavu. I'm attending Transylvania College in Transylvania in Romania, and I'm very honored to be here.
Thank you. Jamara?
Hi, my name is Jamara Jean. I come from the Westover School in Connecticut, and I'm speaking from New Jersey.
Thank you. Leela?
Hi, I'm Leela Rosas Sharif. I attend Miss Porter School and I'm speaking from New York City.
Thank you. Lucy?
Hi, thank you so much for coming to speak with us. I'm Lucy. I go to La Jolla Country Day School and I'm speaking from California.
Thank you. Maria?
My name is Maria Gama. I go to King's Academy and I'm speaking from Amman, Jordan.
Thank you. Sadie?
Hi, I'm Sadie Dyson and I go to the Hewitt School in New York City.
Thank you. Samara?
Hi, I'm Samara. I attend Friends Seminary and I'm speaking from New York City.
And Wava?
Hi, my name is Wava Chan. I go to Westover School in Middlebury and I'm speaking from Connecticut.
Thank you. I'm sorry I mispronounced your first name.
No worries.
And Xenia?
Hi, I'm Xenia. I'm from Mississippi, and I go to St. Andrew's Episcopal School.
That's a lot. I may have missed somebody. Did I miss anyone? Wow. Okay. So good. Anyways, now I'd like to introduce our guest speakers. First of all, Gene Gibbons. Now, Gene covered 6 U.S. presidents during his career as a White House correspondent with Reuters and United Press International. That's Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush Sr., and Clinton. He was president of the Radio Television Correspondents Association and served as a presidential debate panelist in 1992. An ex-U.S. Army officer, he once served as press aide to U.S. Vice President Hubert Humphrey. Gibbons went to primary school with Joe Biden, and he wrote about it recently on News Decoder, concluding that the former vice president will be a caring leader as president. He's also recently published a memoir, Breaking News: 6 Presidents, which is available on both Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Thank you for joining us, Gene. Gene, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Nelson, and hello, everyone. Inaugurations historically are a time of national renewal, a celebration, if you will, of the passing of the torch of leadership, a recommitment to our national ideals. What a president says in an inaugural address often echoes down through the ages, becomes a national rhetorical touchstone, a rallying cry for the American people. Think, for example, of Abraham Lincoln. At his second inaugural, Lincoln said, "With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the light, let us strive to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds." That was in 1865 at the end of the American Civil War. Inspiring words. Sadly, as we all know, Lincoln didn't live to fulfill those words. In the midst of the Great Depression, when millions of Americans were out of work, broke, and scared to death because so many of them were literally starving, this is what Franklin Delano Roosevelt said: "This great nation will endure, as it has endured, will revive, and will prosper. So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance." Reassuring words, words that gave hope to a people. Then there was John Fitzgerald Kennedy, calling on his countrymen to commit themselves to national service. "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country," Kennedy said. Do words matter? Well, I can assure you from personal experience they do. Kennedy's words resonated with me when I was a young Army officer serving on one of the front lines of the Cold War, when the going occasionally got a little bit scary. Having a purpose larger than oneself puts steel in your spine, and it helps scare the monsters away. Which brings me to the present moment, a time of monsters, quite frankly, for we Americans. The only time comparable to the one we're in now was in 1861, when America was on the cusp of civil war. President-elect Biden faces a tall order next Wednesday. What to say to try to start the healing of a broken country?
Thank you, Gene. I guess you're not going to predict what he's going to say. Maybe someone else will go out on that limb. Now, Mark Weinberg, our other guest expert. Mark was a spokesman, advisor, and speechwriter for U.S. President Ronald Reagan. A best-selling author, public speaker, political commentator, and executive communications consultant, he has served in communications management positions at Fortune 500 corporations. Weinberg is a nationally recognized expert on issues management, executive positioning, thought leadership, and crisis communications. Welcome, Mark. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thank you very much, Nelson and Gene. It's an honor to be with you. Gene and I worked together during the Reagan years. He was a senior reporter, and I was an aide in the press office. Gene has significantly more experience with presidents than I do, but I have a unique perspective on one president in particular. I've been through 3 presidential inaugurations, Reagan in 1981 when he took over for Carter, Reagan in 1985 when he was reelected, and Reagan handing off to Bush in 1989. And for me, inaugurations were, in some respects, just another day at the office, believe it or not. In 1981, when Reagan took over for Carter, which is the most comparable now to what's happening now, I was in a small group of about 4 or 5 people who tried to get to the White House so we could occupy our offices literally at noon when the presidencies changed. And we were in a cab going up Pennsylvania Avenue. There were no troops, there were just policemen. And we got stopped. As soon as we got close to the White House, we were stopped by one checkpoint and got closer and stopped by another. And finally, we kept looking at our watches and think we're not going to make it. Well, we made it at about 11:55. We walked into the West Wing of the White House. The Carter staff had left. There were empty desks, and we faced a screaming press corps wanting to know where there were copies of President Reagan's, the new president's inaugural address. And we went to work. We didn't have any opportunity to reflect on the moment. The only thing we wanted to know was, where are the Xerox machines? But the one thing I will point out, and Gene alluded to this, is that all 3 inaugurals were peaceful and civil and professional and respectful of the process. The only troops that you saw in Washington were men and women in dress uniforms who participated in the inaugural parade. They weren't lining the streets to protect the new president from a political mob. So this is uncharted territory for all of us, I think. And we were speaking earlier of what's the vibe, and the vibe is nobody knows what to expect. So it's an interesting time. You are witnessing an extraordinary experience in American politics, as we all are. And I appreciate the opportunity to share some of my memories, but more importantly, to know what's on your mind as Wednesday comes upon us.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Mark. With that, let's open the conversation up. We've got something like 19 students around the virtual roundtable here. It's going to be a pile on for questions based on the advanced questions that they sent in. But who's going to be the brave one and raise their hands for? Leela, I see your hand raised. Leela, would you want to ask a question?
Yes. So as we know, President Donald Trump will not be attending the inauguration. And so I'm just wondering, how does this inauguration, the ceremony that shows the American people, the peaceful transfer of power between elected leaders, how will that go on without the current president being there to support this new administration? How does this, traditional symbol of the American people, how will that change during this unusual inauguration, to say the least?
Well, it certainly is unusual. Vice President Pence will be there. And so in that sense, there will be kind of a passing of the torch. But this is very, very unusual that in 2001, there was a closely contested election. It went to the Supreme Court where it was ultimately decided. And Al Gore, who won the popular vote but lost in the Electoral College, was sitting there on the dais showing his support for the new president. Presidents have historically, Mark can talk to this better than I, presidents traditionally have left notes for their successors, usually very gracious notes. And I'm going to turn it over to Mark to talk about what President Reagan did for his successor.
Thanks, Gene. President Reagan hand wrote a little note to George Bush that urged him to hang tough and told him that he would miss their luncheons, and he slipped it in the drawer of the famous Resolute desk in the Oval Office, and he began a tradition that every president since has followed. Whether Donald Trump will do so for Joe Biden remains to be seen. My guess is that he won't. I think, for what it's worth, that it's unfortunate that President Trump is being petulant and won't participate in this ritual. Ultimately, other than the optics, it doesn't matter very much. The ceremony will go on. The Chief Justice will swear in Joseph Biden, and Kamala Harris, and at noon we will have a new government. I think it speaks more to the personality of Trump than it does to anything else. But here's the one thing. Nobody really knows what's going, that's as I was saying earlier, nobody really knows what's going to happen on Wednesday. Originally, we had heard that President Trump was going to go to his estate in Florida on Tuesday and just be out of town. Today, I heard on the news that he plans to leave Wednesday morning by helicopter from the White House, perhaps in the midst of everything. So it's an unknown, but Gene's right. Vice President Pence will be the high-level representative of the old administration. The ceremony will go on, hopefully without a hitch. And a little bit after noon on Wednesday, we'll be on to the next chapter.
Sorry, go ahead, Gene. Excuse me.
When we talk about the optics, we should mention that Presidents Clinton, Bush, and Obama will be on hand for the inauguration. And in a sense, I think I like the optics of that situation, in that here are the former presidents of both parties handing off to the new president. One of the things that has very much disturbed me is the way that Donald Trump has disgraced the office. And I think that the fact that the former presidents will be there will help make Donald Trump an asterisk in American history. At least I certainly hope so.
Next question from students. You can either raise your hand or just speak up.
Hi, I'm Xenia, and my question kind of follows Leela's question, and it kind of has to do with the same topic. It was, how important are the traditions of the presidential transition? And if this administration doesn't follow them, will it impact continued partisanship of the country?
Well, the traditions are just that. They're traditions. They're nice, and they're nice traditions. What should happen is, as you may know, the tradition is that the outgoing president receives the incoming president at the White House about an hour or so before the ceremony at the Capitol is supposed to begin. In this case, what should happen is the Trumps and the Pences should receive the Bidens and the Harrises at the White House, welcome them in full public view with the press corps present. Then they go into a private little reception of coffee and orange juice in the blue room of the White House and chit-chat for a little bit, and some congressional leaders. Then they board a motorcade. The two presidents ride together. The wives ride together, the vice presidents ride together, a small pool, and Gene has been in these pools with other presidents, go from the White House to the Capitol. The ceremony occurs. The old president goes off and the new president takes over. But that's unlikely to happen. The other thing that is a nice tradition is that the outgoing first lady usually welcomes the incoming first lady, in this case, Mrs. Trump, should have invited Mrs. Biden, Dr. Biden, to the White House to give her a tour of the family quarters. She'll be the new hostess. That's the normal tradition. That's not going to happen. It's no big deal. Joe Biden knows her way around the White House, and Joe Biden knows his way around the White House. But it's unfortunate that to the very bitter end, this administration won't honor the traditions that say, as Gene was saying earlier, the real message of those four presidents coming together is we're one country. We're one country. We may have two parties, but we're one country. And it's unfortunate that these traditions are not being maintained, but ultimately life will go on.
It's unfortunate, but does it make a difference?
No, ultimately, no. I mean, it would be nice, but as Gene was saying, asterisk. As of noon on Wednesday, all the focus will be on Biden and the future and the pandemic and the economy. And the fact that Trump didn't have him for orange juice and coffee will make some interesting columns, but ultimately, no, I don't think it matters. It's unfortunate. And the other thing I would ask, and Gene may have an opinion of this, I think it matters more to people like us who observe these things than it does to the average person worried about a vaccination or a job. It's unfortunate, I regret it, but I don't think it ultimately does longstanding damage.
I wonder, though, Mark, if it does not have a political consequence. 75 million Americans voted for Donald Trump, and the polls indicate that a large percentage of them believe the lie that he has spread since the election was decided, that he actually won, that it was a stolen election. And the fact that he perpetuates that lie, I think will hurt the country, at least short term.
He's going to answer his phone. In the meantime, I think Charlie Gorvin, you had your hand up next, and then Giovanna. Charlie, you got a question?
Yeah, it goes off of what Mr. Gibbons had just said about lies. A huge spread of misinformation, social media, and beyond has the outgoing president. And this has led people to consider that it might be in something of like an epistemic crisis. And as two people who worked really closely with the spread of information and communicating information, I wonder what you think the impact of this misinformation might be, and what the incoming president might do to restore some faith in truth.
Well, that goes to what I was saying, Charles, that the fact that Trump will try to perpetuate this lie, the big lie that he has told since the election, will have continue the division that we currently face. In addition to that, you have some bad actors that can try to capitalize on this. Our adversaries, who we know are already have already participated in helping spread the disinformation. This plays into the hands of the Kremlin, of the Beijing, the Iranians, anyone else who would do us harm. So in one sense, it's a national security problem for us as well.
I think, Charles, the other part of your question is, what could the next administration do? And the answer is pretty simple: just tell the truth. And I think the one thing that the American people expect from Joe Biden is whether it's good or bad, he's going to tell you the truth. He's not going to sugarcoat it. He's not going to shade it. He's not going to put it in a way that advantages him politically. And I think ultimately, the antidote to lies is truth. So I hope, I don't want to be Pollyanna about it or naive, because every administration spins, but I hope that fundamentally and expect that the Biden administration will be honest, that we will not have to wonder if he's outright lying. And if he does tell the truth, it will have a tremendously positive effect very quickly.
Giovanna, I think you're next in line.
Yes, thank you. My question is, how can President-elect Joe Biden use the inauguration to create momentum for his plans to manage COVID-19 in the U.S.?
Well, it's going to be difficult. It's his inaugural address is probably one of the most important pieces of oratory of my lifetime. He is going to have to try and begin to unite the country, a very badly divided country at this point. And he's going to have to do it within an environment that sometimes cannot be helpful. I think, for example, of some of the right-wing media, starting at the top with Fox News, which has consistently amplified his message, which has been untrue.
The only thing I think that he can do to motivate, you asked how he could motivate us on COVID-19. Was that, tell me again.
Yes.
Well, I think what he has to do is what he's been doing, and that's to talk about it, and 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 to engage men and women in key positions who know what they're doing. And this is one of the few problems in our society where if you throw a bunch of money at it, it actually will help. Because one of the things, and Gene and I were talking about this the other day, that it was bad enough that this administration downplayed things. It was bad enough that they misled. It was bad enough that they mismanaged the testing program. But once Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson rose to the challenge and came up with the vaccine, the only job that the administration had, the one job, was to make sure that it got to people quickly and efficiently. And they blew it. It's clearly not happening. I mean, you can turn on any television station or any newspaper in the United States, and all you see are stories about inefficiencies in the vaccine distribution problem. That was the only job they had. So if I were Biden, I would be sitting down every day with my team and saying, exactly what are we doing to get doses made and into people? He's got to be like a dog with a bone. And so far, at least as president-elect, he's done well with that. The problem becomes, and then I'll stop talking about this, is that when you're president, you can't be focused on just one thing at a time, because there are a million issues. As Gene pointed out, the most important thing is unifying the country, which is a very massive undertaking. But you have unemployment, you have COVID-19, you have existential threats from adversaries, you have infrastructure, you have this, you have that. And when you're the president, you're responsible for it all. So it's hard to maintain your focus, which is why you have to hire people who know what they're doing.
Sooner or later, we're going to take questions from the floor. One has already come in from New York. I'd encourage people off camera to write their questions, and then you can vote for questions that you may not have posted, but which you like a lot. Students, next one up, I think, is Lucy in San Diego.
Hi, thank you. I was just going to ask, so nowadays we see so many large personalities in the White House. How does one remain unbiased when interacting with these characters and reporting on them?
That can be difficult. The challenge for a journalist is that you tend to be harder on the people that you like, quite frankly. You bend over backwards to try to stay objective, and often you can be, in some respects, not objective in covering the people that you share an affinity with. And throw that to Mark.
Well, when you say big personalities, I guess I mean, Leslie Stahl of CBS News said when Reagan would walk into a room, we would all be puddles, because he was very charismatic and charming and things of that kind. And to be honest with you, very honest with you, those of us who worked for Reagan and other presidents kind of sort of wanted people to be a little bit in awe. That wasn't a bad thing from our standpoint. So, but I have found that reporters, at least the seasoned and experienced ones, those like Gene, who have covered 6 or 7 presidents, or Sam Donaldson, who some of you may have heard of ABC News, who have covered many presidents, they kind of develop a hardened aspect and don't take everything they're spoon-fed. It's hard. It can be intimidating. These are powerful, bigger than life figures. And to really kind of poke them and ask probing questions can be intimidating. I've never had to do it. I've never had to pin down a president. So I would yield to the journalists there, except to say that it isn't, I'm sure it isn't easy.
I think next up is Eugenia. Sorry, Gene.
I was going to say that on one occasion I asked President Clinton a question that irritated him, and he started his response by saying, well, if you're so smart, why aren't you president? He probably had a good point.
You throwing your hat in the ring, Gene? Eugenia in Joburg.
Yes, hello, my name is Eugenia. As someone who's actually passionate about gender issues and racial issues, I'd like to know how, if in any way, how will having the first female African and Asian American vice president-elect in the White House, how will it shift racial and gender relations in the US? That's for our guest experts. And for my fellow panelists on the roundtable, I'd like to know, how does having Kamala Harris in office, what does it mean for young girls in the US?
There you go. Question for our guest experts and also for the students at the round table.
I'll take a brief try at that. The answer is, I don't know. I mean, for lack of a better phrase, I suppose it will. I welcome it intensely because as the father of a daughter who is in college, a freshman in college, it's a great and thrilling thing to see that glass ceiling broken. From a media standpoint, it will be interesting to see how the press covers this unique circumstance where the vice president is a woman and the second gentleman is a man, and the traditional roles, at least in this country, are reversed. We'll see. I mean, I'm interested to know, and Gene, I would be very interested to hear what you say about this. Are they going to pay attention to what she wears and what her hair is like and what her makeup is like? These typical things that we as Americans and some journalists have focused on when we've had women in power. But having had Secretary Albright and Mrs. Clinton and Speaker Pelosi, hopefully we've outgrown that and we've gotten better than that, and that we could focus on the person, not on the color of their dress. But it's going to be interesting.
So Gene, if you're going to cover Kamala Harris, would you write about her makeup and her dress?
No, I wouldn't, but I'm afraid that there are people who will. I had a conversation with Hillary Clinton one time. We were flying back from a trip to South Asia, and I got up to get a glass of water and found Mrs. Clinton in the galley of the airplane looking for some saltine crackers. Her stomach was upset. We were the only two people on the airplane that were awake at that point, and so we sat down and had a conversation. And one of the things that absolutely drove her up the wall was the fixation with what she wore, what her latest hairdo was, and very trivial matters like that. On another occasion, we were flying with then Vice President Bush from a visit to Poland to Germany. And we had been in Krakow, and the Bushes went to a hospital for children with cancer. Their 3-year-old daughter died of cancer. And so their visit was not open to the press. On the plane, on the flight to Germany, Mrs. Bush came back and was talking to some of us. Somebody asked her about the visit, and her eyes just filled with tears. And she kind of shook her head and jerked the tears away. And my heart went out to her. I mean, here was a public figure that could not show a very, very human emotion for fear that, that'd be written about and become the story. I hope that, as Mark said, we've progressed from that. I think we have to some extent. I believe that probably not as much as we should have.
Sadie, you are going to be next up with your question, but beforehand, do any students, whether or not in the U.S., have anything to say about whether Kamala Harris in the vice presidency will make a difference in racial terms?
Let me take a stab at that. There's a song in the Broadway musical Hamilton, "In the Room Where It Happens," and I think that's going to be very important to have a person of color at the very highest level of government representing the hopes and aspirations of people of color. We've had people in very senior positions, Colin Powell, I'm drawing a blank now, showing my age, the Secretary of State for President Bush.
Condi Rice.
Condi Rice. But now we'll have a vice president, someone's just a heartbeat away from the presidency, who is both a woman and a person of color. And I think that's tremendously important. And I celebrate that for our America.
Sadie?
I think Leela had
sorry,
something
Mark,
she wanted
go
to
ahead,
say.
please.
I think Leela had
Oh,
her
Leela,
hand raised.
Leela, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Leela, would you like to speak?
Yes, I'll make it quick. As I said when introducing myself, I attend Miss Porter's school, an all-girls school in Connecticut. And when the news came out that Joe Biden selected Kamala Harris to be his running mate, we happened to be on a Zoom call with current Black students at my school, and their parents, their families, and our head of school. And we were in the middle of this this like Zoom meeting, and the news came out, and the excitement was just palpable. Like, even though I can only see people's faces on the screens, like not everyone had their cameras on, just on that call, like the excitement for the future, kind of ambitions of the students there, that was a really powerful moment. And although on the day, the presidential election was certified, the celebrations in suburban Connecticut weren't as big as the ones in my hometown, New York City. Still, like, the excitement was there. And just speaking for my friends, like the students I met, like, this is an exciting moment for us. Like, having someone to look up to for these, like, for any like political ambitions we have, or even non-political ones, just knowing that we have that representation at one of the highest offices in the country, that's truly amazing.
I'm showing my age a bit. Of course, Barack Obama was in the very highest office in the United States. And one of the things I think this does, a lot of the unrest we've had, I think, stemmed from Obama's presidency. We still have a tremendous problem with white supremacy in the United States. And I think there were an awful lot of people who were not at all happy to have a person of color as the president of the United States. But I think Kamala Harris's election and the position she's going to hold shows that for a majority of the American people, we don't have that feeling that this is a white country that should be preserved for white people. This is a pluralistic country where we celebrate having incredible diversity. And I think that signal is important to send. I think that's going to be the part of the historical moment that we're in.
Any other students like to speak to this question before we turn to Sadie? Just speak up. I can't see all that. If anyone raises a hand, there are too many with raised hands now. Okay, if not, then Sadie, you're up.
Yeah, so this is kind of a general and historical question about presidential elections, but starting with the election of 1800 between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, presidential campaigns have often been very contentious. In your opinion, what is the best analogy in American history for the present state of political affairs?
Gene, you're a historian?
Most recently, we had a contentious election in 1968. In addition to Hubert Humphrey and Richard Nixon, we had George Wallace, who carried 3 or 4 states, I believe. In 1992, we had a contentious election where we had a third-party candidate, Ross Perot. But I don't think there's any historical precedent for what we've seen here. Not even the election of 1861, where Lincoln himself was ushered into Washington for his inauguration, surrounded by troops. I don't think that there was the poisoned atmosphere that his opponent created. I may be wrong on my history on that. Perhaps Mark has a better idea, a better grasp
I
of
think
that.
you're right. I think what makes this unique, I mean, yes, they've been contentious elections. I mean, they said in 1960 that Kennedy stole the election, and Gene referred to 1968, and Gore and the Gore-Bush election, which was as contested as anything we've seen recently. What makes this incomparable is no other losing candidate has refused to acknowledge the victor. This is the first time that I know of that has ever happened, where they left the White House or left the campaign refusing to acknowledge the result. And that's what makes this unique, because it gives those 75 million people a glimmer of hope or a glimmer of legitimacy that I think is very dangerous. The idea that the President of the United States is an illegitimate one is very poisonous. And I think that that's what makes this particular circumstance incomparably unique.
Hannah, I just saw your chat message. You will be able to ask a question, but we have several students in front of you. I believe it's Jon's turn.
This question isn't really that closely related to the election, but mostly the future actions of the new administration. How do you believe that the new administration's foreign policy on NATO will address the issues of the alliance from your point of view and from experience in the Cold War? How do you think they will address, for example, the big number of member states that do not abide to the 2% of GDP rule?
Well, I think that Joe Biden is going to try to restore the NATO alliance, which was badly damaged by Donald Trump. I could never understand why he would try to weaken the alliance, which has kept the peace for 75 years at this point. He seemed to be playing into the hands of the Russians, as far as I was concerned. But I think that that not only will Biden be trying to reestablish the connections that formerly existed between the United States and Europe, but I think the Europeans are going to be working very hard to restore those ties as well.
I don't think that he will make the 2% of GDP requirement as rigid as Trump did, as Gene knows better than I. It's always been there. It's none of the predecessors to Trump have paid much attention to it or enforced it. He wasn't wrong technically to bring it up, but I think that Joe Biden, if nothing else, will represent a return to the normalcy of. I don't think that's going to be a focus of his. And I think that should it be? I don't know. But I don't think he's going to be like Trump and be an SOB about it and make it a talking point. I think he's going to try to do exactly what Gene said, which is repair the relationship as opposed to further strain it.
Christina?
Yeah, so kind of on that note, can you share your insights on the significance of Reagan's Shining City Upon a Hill speech, specifically when Reagan sort of like juxtaposed American exceptionalism with like the communist threats of the time?
Yes.
Do you guys think that was more of a historical truth, or has that just been like rhetorical strategy? And how has that strategy changed since the Cold War?
The answer to your question is yes. It was both. Ronald Reagan, I can tell you that he absolutely believed in American exceptionalism. He believed in his heart that our country was special, that had a unique role and destiny, and that there was nothing comparable to the United States. He didn't think the American people were better than anybody else. That wasn't what his point was. But he believed that the United States of America existed and should exist as a beacon, as a hope, as an aspiration. And so when he said that, he meant it and he felt it and it was in his heart. But he also knew that the symbolism, if nothing else, Reagan was a guy who understood symbolism and understood imagery, and that the idea of this shining city on a hill, whatever that meant, had an emotional appeal. So it was both sincerely heartfelt, but it was also effective rhetoric.
Gene, you were there, right?
I was, yeah. Of course, the phrase comes from a religious text, a book called Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. And one of the problems that we as Americans have had is a myth has arisen, and I am in no way saying that President Reagan played into this myth, but that the United States is a Christian country. Christian nationalism is a real problem in the United States. And there's a myth that the founding fathers based the construction of this country on Christian principles. Well, the founding fathers were not Christians. They were deists. They were non-sectarian. And the reason they were is because they understood, they knew history, and they remembered and wanted to avoid the bloodshed that had been caused so often by religious strife in Europe. And so one of the things I think it is important for all of us, but particularly all of you who are students, is to study history. Really try to get a grasp of what has transpired, because it's often a predictor of the future. The philosopher George Santana said famously, those who don't know history are condemned to repeat it. Another thing I would urge is that to have, yes, deep religious convictions, but to know something about other faith traditions, to know and understand and respect other faith traditions, because I think that's terribly important too in a country that is, in a way, exceptional in that we aspire to diversity, we aspire toward equality, and we aspire to be a moral beacon for the rest of humanity.
Thank you, Gene. We've got questions from 4 more students at the round table, and that's going to have to be it because there's not that much time, and we do have 2 questions from the audience. So, Samara, with no further ado, it's over to you.
Hi, thank you for having me. So I have a question about the polarization in the United States right now. Gene, in an article by the Citizen's Voice, you mentioned that the editors would constantly ask you if an article was fair or imbalanced. And is there any worry that both sidism in the media will affect the truth of an article, or that sometimes there needs to be an imbalance because of the information that is objectively true? And then kind of a broader perspective, what role do you think the media has in the polarization or depolarization of the United States?
Very good question, Samara. Yes, there is a problem with what's known as false equivalence. That if somebody states that the sun is going to rise in the east tomorrow, that you have to find someone who says, no, it isn't, it's going to rise in the west. There is objective truth. And I think that the media has too often fallen into the trap of trying to reflect the position of both sides when one side is untrue, particularly in this past administration. It's a difficult problem. It's made more difficult, I think. I'm not a big fan of television news. I think that it too often reflects opinion rather than fact. And what I would urge all of you to do is to cast a wide net, to get as much information input as you can. Read the New York Times, but read the Wall Street Journal as well. Read National Review, read the Washington Post. Look at conservative opinion, look at liberal opinion. Read books, read people's memoirs, and try to be as well informed as you possibly can, because to make a democracy like the US democracy work in a very, very complex time demands a well-informed citizenry.
Mark?
With regard to that, having never been a journalist, so I have a little bit of a different perspective, even though I got my degree in journalism 5,000 years ago in college. You know, we're now at a point in this country where everybody thinks CNN hates Trump and that they're incredibly biased against him, and that Fox loves Trump and they're incredibly biased for him. So watch one, watch the other, and split the difference. And the truth is somewhere in between, right? Well, that's not true. There are, exactly as Gene said, there are facts and there are truths. And there are things that are real and things that are not. And that's you know, the earth is round. It just is, I think. But the one thing I will say that I think one of the least appealing and most dangerous legacies of this administration is the constant, the phrase fake news, the constant effort to convince people that reporters are liars, that they have agendas and they can't be trusted, and you shouldn't believe what you see or what you hear. Now, it is true that people like Sean Hannity and people like Rachel Maddow on either side of the, I hope you know who they are on either sides of the spectrum and have points of view. But my experience, and this is from a spokesman standpoint, not a journalist standpoint, my experience has been that I have never known a reporter, not a commentator, a reporter to intentionally mislead or lie or fabricate. As Gene knows, I worked with a lot of reporters over the years, wire services, newspapers, television, radio, you name it, for years and years and years. And I never, sometimes they didn't get it right. Sometimes they were a little bit off, but I never knew a reporter to make anything up. And I never knew a reporter to intentionally lie in his or her story. And so my point is, I hope all of you take with a huge grain of salt the Trump administration's suggestion that the press is the enemy of the people, because that they are not.
Emma, you're up next, then Hannah and Evan.
So this was the first election process that I really was invested in and paid attention to, since the last one was when I was very young. And I always found myself asking the question of why the Electoral College is still in place in this day and age, because I learned that it was made when there were 4 million people in America. And so now that there's more than 300 million, how is it still relevant? And what would you say are the pros and cons, or how is it fair in urban settings versus rural settings?
Well, the pros are that it gives small states power that they would not otherwise have. The cons are that it gives small states the power that maybe they don't deserve. We have now had several elections where the popular vote was much different from the electoral vote. Will that change? It's going to take a constitutional amendment. That's a very difficult row to hoe. It is a problem because it has empowered small rural states with much different interests than the large, very complex urban states. I'd like to hear Mark's opinion of that as well.
Well, it's actually a broader question than that, because you could argue, why should Utah have the same number of senators as New York? They don't have nearly the same number of people. So we have some built-in systems that are antiquated. But as Gene says, changing them is virtually impossible. My view, and this is a personal view, is one woman, one man, one vote. I think the guy who gets the most votes should win. I think it's pretty straightforward, because I think that that's the will of the people. And if it just seems to me that if you get more votes than the next guy, in every other circumstance that I know of in politics, whether it's state government, student council, if the person with the most votes wins. This is a peculiar and, in my view, antiquated system that I think is not fair and is not right, but I also think is highly unlikely to change. It's always better when the popular vote and the electoral vote are in sync. But ask Al Gore and Joe Lieberman. You know, they were both chosen by the people to be president and vice president respectively, and neither got the job.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have 6 minutes and we've got 4 questions. Do the arithmetic. So we're gonna have to be quick here. And the ground rules now will be one of our guests as opposed to both. We'll have the wisdom from one of our guests as opposed to the wisdom from both. Hannah, you're up next.
My question is about how over the past 4 years, the Trump administration has upheld values of white supremacy and really divided our nation religiously and racially through passing harmful laws and policy. And Biden has stated that his primary concern is uniting the country. How would you, in your opinion, advise him on this pursuit, especially regarding managing and balancing this action And by focusing on his efforts to unite the country, does he risk or damage his promise to undo some of Trump's policies?
Either Gene or Mark then.
I think Mark has already spoken to that in a sense. Tell the truth, have experts doing the jobs that require experts, and try to manage the country effectively as opposed to incompetently.
Evan, your question?
Thank you. Nelson, thank you for putting this webinar together. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
My question is based on Gene's opening remarks. You mentioned from Lincoln's second inaugural address this idea of firmness in the right. And I was thinking about this in the context of what happened on January 6th at the Capitol, the US Capitol, and what this will have, what these implications have for the Biden administration going forward, particularly as we continue to challenge the values of the Venezuelan and Chinese regimes, and what that really means for the United States to have this idea of firmness in the right when we still have these white nationalist, white supremacist partitions in our own country that are challenging our own democratic institutions in the first place.
Mark?
Well, you're right. We are always going to have white supremacists, but we don't have to have a president who gives them daylight, who legitimizes them, and who looks the other way. And I think it's very important that President Biden set a tone of intolerance of that. I think there are some law enforcement things that have to happen. But the reality is, this is always going to be a divided country. We are never going to approach anything close to 100% unanimity of opinion. That's just America. That's just how it is. And that's okay as long as it is respectful and civil and tolerant and nonviolent. It's okay to have a different opinion. It's not okay to be racist. It's not okay to be anti-Semitic. It's not okay to dislike immigrants. And the tone has to start at the top. And the Biden administration, and hopefully Kamala Harris, as if nothing else symbolically at first, will set the tone that this country welcomes, appreciates, celebrates diversity, and does not tolerate grotesque actions based on hate.
Thank you, Mark. The question now from the floor. This is from Maureen Burgess in New York at Hewitt School. Might our panelists address the systemic and overt racism that has been legitimized by the Trump administration and supporters in Congress, as most recently evidenced by the riot at the Capitol? Gene?
Well, as Mark said, setting a tone is just so enormously important. And I think Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will do that. They will not tolerate, they will not sanction, they won't wink at what has gone on for the past 4 years, which is a surge in hate speech, in hate thought, and as we saw last Wednesday, in hate action.
Mark, any comments on the question?
No, I agree 100% with Gene.
And a question from Dan Roach. Inauguration aside, how concerning is it that the Senate has yet to confirm any of Biden's top cabinet nominees?
It's not. He can't nominate anybody until he's president. Only a president can send a nomination to a Senate. So what will happen, presumably, this is just a little side note, at least what used to happen, after he's sworn in and is technically president of the United States, somebody on his staff will present him with a series of documents to sign, which will formally nominate the people he has announced. And those will go to the Senate, and conceivably the Senate could vote on them that afternoon. They've done that in the past, as Gene knows, but they won't as a practical matter because it's so divided. But the Senate cannot vote on anybody until Biden is legally president and can make the nomination.
Gene, anything to add to that?
No, I won't. Mark's absolutely right. That is how it has happened in the past. Usually the first people to be confirmed are the national security team, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Homeland Security. I don't know whether that will happen this time. I rather suspect it will, given the fact that Mitch McConnell seems inclined to work with Joe Biden, at least initially.
Before we finish up here, I'd like to ask the students at the virtual roundtable if any of them have anything to say, anything that stood out during this discussion, any comments you'd like to make? Any students like to say something? I see two hands raised, but I think it was for questions earlier. Well, with that, it's the top of the hour, at least in Europe it is, in the United States. There are time zones elsewhere where it's not the top of the hour, but in any case, this has been terrifically interesting to me, a lot of fun, and I'd like to thank our guest experts, Gene and Mark. Thank you very much for your personal insights and your experiences. And I'd like to thank the students who took time out from their busy schedules. I'm really impressed by the number who were able to show up. I guess it's the one of the good sides of the pandemic is that we're getting used to virtual connections like this. But it's also, I think it's terrific that we had 5 countries represented on camera with different perspectives. So anyways, I want to thank everyone for being a part of this. We had over 100 people off camera who were listening. Thank you for being on board. And I want to wish everybody all the best, a peaceful week coming forward. Let's hope this pandemic gets over soon because it's global. We're all affected, and wish everyone well. Thanks again.